Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is lying in a sterile, brilliantly lit hospital room. There are machines beeping a steady, reassuring rhythm. There are monitors tracking heart rates, blood pressure, oxygen levels. There is a doctor in scrubs, a nurse offering ice chips, and perhaps a tiny, miraculous tube delivering an epidural that numbs the lower half of the body. It is a highly choreographed, intensely monitored medical event. And even with all of this modern armor, it is still exhausting, terrifying, and profoundly difficult. Now, picture this. You are standing in the fading light of a late afternoon. It is 50,000 years before now. There is no white room. There are no monitors. There is only the damp earth of a forest floor, or the hard, uneven rock at the back of a cave. The air smells like wood smoke, sweat, and impending rain. There is no doctor. There is no medicine. There is no pain relief, not a single drop. A young woman is crouching in the dirt, gripping a thick wooden branch so hard her knuckles are white, her breath coming in ragged animal gasps. She is about to bring a new human being into the world, and she knows, with the absolute cold certainty of someone who has watched her sisters and mothers do this, that the next few hours might be the last hours of her life. But here is a question nobody actually asks. We all just accept it as a given. Why does it have to be like this? And I do not mean the cultural expectations. I mean the sheer, brutal physical reality of it. Why is human birth so uniquely, ridiculously, catastrophically dangerous? And you are about to say, come on, it is just biology. Every animal gives birth. It is the most natural thing in the world. But that is exactly the false assumption we need to cut off right now. Not as in, does the biological machinery work? Obviously it does, or you and I would not be sitting here. We are not talking about simple biology. We are talking about a spectacular, glaring, evolutionary design flaw. If you look at the rest of the mammalian kingdom, birth is certainly a serious event, but it is rarely a cliff edge of mortality. A female chimpanzee, our closest living genetic relative, can essentially squat down, quietly deliver a baby in about 20 minutes, bite the umbilical cord, and climb back up a tree to find a snack. A horse gives birth, and within an hour, the foal is standing up, shaking its mane, and ready to outrun a predator. And then there is us, humans. For us, the process takes hours, sometimes days. It involves agonizing pain, a shockingly high risk of hemorrhaging, a massive risk of structural damage, and a very real chance that the baby simply will not fit. What if we are not the pinnacle of biological perfection? What if we are actually an evolutionary compromise held together by duct tape and sheer luck? What if the very things that make us the dominant species on this planet are the exact same things that turned our entry into the world into a lethal gauntlet? And this is the rabbit hole we are going down today. Buckle up, because this is about to get weird, messy, and profoundly heavy. Let us start at the very beginning. What does it even mean to be built wrong? Let's start with the most obvious thing. The shape of your body. Look at yourself right now. If you are standing up, or even if you are just sitting in a chair, think about your spine. Think about your hips. Millions of years ago, out on the savannas of Africa, our ancestors made a wildly ambitious, incredibly risky move. We stood up. We stopped walking on 4 legs, and we shifted our entire body weight onto 2. This was a brilliant strategic decision. Bipedalism, walking upright, is an absolute superpower. It let us see over the tall savanna grass to spot predators. It made us incredibly energy efficient for long-distance running. And, most importantly, it freed up our hands. Suddenly, we had hands available to carry food, to hold tools, to throw rocks, to carry children. Standing up is the foundation of the human empire. But evolution is not a free lunch. Every superpower comes with a price tag. When we stood up, the architecture of our pelvis had to completely change. If you look at a chimpanzee's pelvis, it is elongated, almost like a flat blade. The birth canal is a straight, wide tube. The baby chimp just slides right through. But to support the weight of a human torso walking on 2 legs, our pelvis had to become a bowl. It had to become shorter, wider, and completely re-angled to hold our internal organs from spilling out due to gravity. And in doing so, the birth canal became narrow. It became twisted. It became a bony ring that is essentially an obstacle course. So, problem number 1, we narrowed the exit door. And right about now, you are probably thinking, well, okay, a narrow exit door isn't great, but surely evolution would adjust the size of the passenger, right? And that brings us to problem number 2. Because right around the time our pelvis was getting narrower, something else was happening to our species. We started eating meat. We discovered fire. We learned to cook our food. Cooking food pre-digests it, unlocking massive amounts of calories. And what did our bodies do with all those surplus calories? We built brains. Huge, greedy, metabolically expensive, ballooning brains. Over a couple of million years, the human brain nearly tripled in size. So, we have a rapidly narrowing, twisted exit door, and we have a passenger whose head is getting bigger and rounder and harder with every passing millennium. In the 1960s, a biological anthropologist named Sherwood Washburn coined a term for this spectacular evolutionary collision. He called it the obstetrical dilemma. It is the ultimate biological paradox. We need a narrow pelvis to walk. We need a giant head to think. And these two absolute necessities slammed into each other right in the birth canal. You are trying to pass a watermelon through a space designed for a lemon. And the mechanics of how this actually happens honestly break my brain every time I think about them. Because the human pelvis is not just narrow, it is shaped differently at the top than it is at the bottom. The entrance to the human birth canal is widest from side to side. But the exit of the birth canal is widest from front to back. This means that a human baby cannot just slide straight out. It has to perform a complex, agonizing gymnastics routine inside the mother's body. The baby's head enters sideways. Then, midway through, it has to rotate 90 degrees to fit the lower part of the canal. And then, once the head is out, the baby's shoulders, which are uniquely broad in humans, get stuck. So the baby has to rotate again. And here is where it gets genuinely terrifying. Because of this twisting, when a human baby finally emerges, it is almost always facing backwards. It is facing away from the mother. Now hold on. Think about what that actually means in the wild. If a female chimpanzee is giving birth alone, the baby comes out facing her. She can reach down, clear the airway, guide the baby up to her chest, and pull it free. But for a human mother 50,000 years ago, squatting in the dirt alone, her baby is coming out facing away from her. If she reaches down and tries to pull the baby out, she naturally pulls it forward, toward her own belly. And because of the angle of the human spine, pulling a baby forward in that position can snap the infant's neck backwards. Yes, exactly that. Let that land for a moment. The biomechanics of our bodies mean that a human mother, acting entirely alone, runs a massive risk of accidentally killing her own child just trying to finish the delivery. So here is where the story takes a sharp turn. Because evolution had backed us into a terrifying corner, we could not walk upright and have giant brains and also give birth alone safely. The math simply did not work. So, what did we do? We cheated. We brought in backup. Evolutionary anthropologists like Wenda Trevarthen, who spent years studying the origins of human childbirth, point out something absolutely remarkable. Humans are essentially the only primates on Earth that actively seek out assistance during birth. Every other animal hides. A cat goes into the darkest corner of the closet. A dog finds a quiet spot under the porch. They want to be completely alone, because giving birth makes you vulnerable to predators. But humans, we panic if we are alone. We scream for our mothers. We look for our sisters. We want someone, anyone, to be there. And this is not just a cultural preference, it is a deeply wired survival instinct, because we literally needed a second pair of hands to catch the baby as it emerged backwards, to unwrap the umbilical cord from its neck, to clear its airway, and to hand it to the mother. Long before we invented the wheel, long before we painted animals on the walls of caves, we invented the midwife. Think about the scene in that ancient camp. When a woman went into labor, the men likely retreated, the hunters stepped back, and the women of the clan gathered. They formed a tight, protective circle. They brought water in animal skins. They brought soft moss or leaves to catch the blood. They wiped her forehead. They held her hands. They locked eyes with her and breathed with her. And the science behind this is beautiful. When a woman is terrified, her body produces adrenaline, which actually stalls labor. It stops the contractions. It is an ancient reflex. If a saber-toothed tiger is outside the cave, you do not want to go into labor right now. But when a woman is surrounded by other women whom she trusts, her brain floods with oxytocin, the hormone of love, of bonding, of safety. The fear drops, the muscles relax, the labor progresses. We did not just survive our biological design flaw, we survived it through empathy. We survived it through the sheer, stubborn power of human connection. But let me throw you something even wilder. Because we have this romanticized image of ancient birth, we picture the circle of women, the chanting, the connection to Mother Earth. But let us be completely honest about what the delivery room actually looked like. There was no sterile environment. There was dirt. There was ash from the fire. There were bacteria that modern medicine has mostly eradicated. And there was gravity. For hundreds of thousands of years, women gave birth squatting, kneeling, or hanging from the low branches of trees. They let gravity do the work. It opens the pelvis by up to 30% more. It aligns the baby with the birth canal. It just makes biomechanical sense. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, if squatting makes so much sense, why does every movie, every TV show, and almost every modern hospital room feature a woman lying flat on her back with her feet in the air? Honestly, I get stuck on this fact every single time because it is one of the most absurd historical accidents in the history of human health. Laying on your back to push a human being out of your body is biomechanically ridiculous. It defies gravity. It compresses the blood vessels supplying oxygen to the baby. It physically narrows the pelvic opening. It makes everything harder, longer, and more painful. So why do we do it? Because back in the 17th century, King Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, had a peculiar hobby. He enjoyed watching his mistresses give birth. He liked the spectacle of it. But if the woman was squatting on a birthing stool, his view was obstructed by the midwives. So he demanded that his mistresses be placed flat on their backs on a bed, simply so he could get a better look from his chair. I am not making this up. A French monarch with a bizarre voyeuristic streak promoted a position that was entirely for the convenience of the observer rather than the mother. Because he was the king, the French aristocracy copied him. Then the doctors copied the aristocracy. And within a few generations, lying on your back became the unquestioned medical standard across the Western world. Thanks, Louis. But let us get back to our ancient mother in the dirt. Even with gravity on her side, even with the circle of women around her, the odds were terrifying. Anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups that live very much like our ancestors did, such as the Hadza in Tanzania or the Kung in the Kalahari, have looked at the historical mortality rates, and the numbers are chilling. Before modern medicine, childbirth was the single leading cause of death for women of childbearing age, by a massive margin. Estimates suggest that over the course of her lifetime, an ancient woman had roughly a 1 in 6 chance of dying in childbirth. Hemorrhage, infection, a baby that was simply stuck. If things went wrong, they went fatally wrong. There was no surgical exit. There was no cesarean section that ended with both mother and child surviving. And if the mother survived, there was the baby. Okay, that's settled. We got the baby out. The mother is breathing. Now, forget everything I just said about the hard part being over, because the story is just beginning. Let us look at this newborn. Look at a human baby. Have you ever actually held one within its first few weeks of life? It is, from a purely zoological standpoint, completely pathetic. A newborn zebra hits the ground, wobbly and wet, and within 45 minutes it is running alongside the herd to escape lions. A newborn dolphin immediately swims to the surface to take its first breath. Even a newborn macaque monkey has the grip strength to instantly latch onto its mother's fur and hold on tight while she swings through the canopy. And a human baby? A human baby cannot even hold its own head up. It cannot focus its eyes. It has no teeth. It cannot walk. It cannot crawl. It cannot even purposefully grab your finger. It is a screaming, vulnerable, completely helpless little potato. Why? Why are we the smartest species on Earth, but we are born the most useless? Remember the obstetrical dilemma? The clash between the narrow hips and the giant brain. Well, scientists like the Swiss zoologist Adolf Portmann pointed out that evolution had to make a compromise. If a human baby stayed in the womb until its brain was developed enough to function like a normal primate newborn, meaning it could walk and feed itself, pregnancy wouldn't last 9 months. It would last 21 months. And the baby's head would be the size of a basketball, which means the mother would explode. So evolution pulled the emergency lever. It evicts the baby early. Human babies are born roughly a year before they are actually finished developing. We give birth to fetuses outside the womb. Pediatricians often call the first 3 months of a human's life the 4th trimester, because the baby is essentially just finishing its gestation on the outside. This is a concept biologists call secondary altriciality, and it changes everything. Because think about what this means for our ancient mother 50,000 years ago. She doesn't just have to survive the agonizing birth. Now she is holding a creature that requires 24/7 carrying. The baby cannot cling to her fur. We lost our fur. So she has to hold it in her arms. If you are carrying a baby in your arms, you cannot easily dig for tubers. You cannot run from a predator. You cannot hunt. You are fundamentally incapacitated. And yet, our species didn't go extinct. We thrived. How? Because of the grandmothers. This is one of my favorite discoveries in evolutionary biology. In 1997, an anthropologist named Kristen Hawkes proposed something called the grandmother hypothesis. She looked at a very strange biological mystery: menopause. Why do human females live for decades after they can no longer have children? In almost every other animal species, once a female stops reproducing, she dies shortly after. There is no evolutionary reason to keep burning calories if you aren't making babies. But human women can live a third of their lives after menopause. Why? Because of that completely helpless, screaming potato of a baby. Hawkes realized that if a mother is nursing an infant and carrying it everywhere, she cannot gather enough food to feed her older toddlers. The whole system collapses. Unless there is an older woman in the tribe, a woman who doesn't have her own infant to carry, a woman who has immense knowledge of the environment, who knows where the roots grow in a drought, who knows how to crack the hardest nuts. The grandmothers foraged. They fed the weaned toddlers. They held the infants so the mothers could sleep. They were the ultimate evolutionary safety net. We didn't conquer the globe just because of male hunters with spears. We conquered the globe because postmenopausal women quietly kept the children from starving to death while the mothers recovered. It is a beautiful picture, isn't it? The circle of women, the supportive grandmother, the triumph of human empathy over brutal biomechanics. But here is the part we don't like to talk about. And now I have to tell you the other side of this, because survival 50,000 years ago was not a Disney movie. It was not a beautiful, harmonious commune with nature. It was an absolute razor's edge war against starvation, cold, and death. And empathy has a limit when the calories run out. Feel the temperature drop in the room for a second, because we have to talk about the brutal math of the ancient world. Imagine our mother again, but this time it is a bad year. The rains didn't come. The herds moved on early. The clan has been walking for days, chewing on dry roots, their stomachs hollow and aching. She is carrying a 3-year-old child who is just learning to walk, a child who still needs to be carried when they run, a child who looks at her with big, trusting eyes. And now she goes into labor. She squats in the dust. The women gather. The baby is born, but it is a difficult birth. The baby is very small. It isn't crying loudly, it is just whimpering. Or perhaps the baby has a visible deformity. Or perhaps, most terrifyingly of all, there are 2 of them. Twins. To our modern minds, a birth is always a miracle. We have neonatal intensive care units. We have formula. We have heating blankets. We fight for every single ounce of life. But 50,000 years ago, a mother in the dirt had to make a calculation that would shatter your soul. If she tries to nurse the sick newborn, her milk might run dry because she herself is starving. If she pours all her energy into a baby that might not survive the week, she will not have the strength to carry her 3-year-old on the march tomorrow. If she has twins, she literally cannot carry both of them in her arms and walk at the same pace as the hunters. If she falls behind, the predators are waiting. If she tries to save everyone, they all die. Herself, the toddler, and the newborn. The anthropologist Sarah Blaffer Hrdy wrote a groundbreaking, devastating book called Mother Nature. She examined the myth of the pure, unconditional maternal instinct, and she found that humans are one of the very few primate species where a mother will, under extreme duress, actively abandon her own infant. We call it exposure, infanticide. It sounds like a monster's word. It sounds evil, but it wasn't evil. It was desperate, agonizing triage. Across countless ancient cultures, there was a heavy, silent practice. When a baby was born, it wasn't immediately considered a full member of the tribe. In many societies, a baby wasn't even given a name for the first week, or the first month, or sometimes even the first year. They withheld the name. They withheld the full emotional attachment. Because the odds of the baby dying were so high, naming it would make the grief unbearable. And if the baby was too weak, or the timing was too terrible, the mother would have to do the unthinkable. The clan is packing up the camp, the fire is put out, the mother nurses her older child. She wraps the newborn in a piece of animal skin, she places it gently under a bush or in a shallow depression in the rock. And she walks away. She walks away into the tree line, listening to the faint cry fade into the distance. She doesn't look back, because if she looks back, she will break. She carries the guilt and the ghost of that child for the rest of her life, so that her 3-year-old can eat, so that the clan can move fast enough to reach the river before the drought kills them all. Sit with that for a moment. Think about the sheer, crushing weight of that choice. We buy our pets birthday cakes today, we hold funerals for goldfish. We have the luxury of boundless, unconditional love because our environment is safe, because our refrigerators are full, because our houses have locks and heaters. They did not have that luxury. The ancient world demanded a price in blood for every generation that made it through. The babies left in the forest, the mothers who bled out in the cave, the toddlers who didn't survive the winter. They were the tax our species paid to exist. And this is where it stops being just a dark story and becomes something else entirely. Because when you look back at that darkness, when you truly look at the horror and the pain and the impossible choices of the ancient delivery room, you don't just see tragedy, you see the most staggering, beautiful defiance in the history of the world. Think about what it took to get you here. Not humanity as an abstract concept, I mean you. You, sitting there, watching this screen, breathing in and out. Every single one of your direct ancestors had to survive this. Follow the chain back. Your mother, and her mother, and her mother. Back through the concrete hospitals of the 20th century. Back through the wooden farmhouses of the 1800s, where infection was a shadow in every room. Back through the Middle Ages, the Roman Empire, the Bronze Age. Keep going. Back to the Ice Age. Back to the African savannah, thousands and thousands of generations of women, and every single one of them, without exception, won the lottery of survival. Not a single one of your direct ancestors died in childbirth before they had the child that would eventually lead to you. Not one of them was left in the forest. Not one of them starved in the drought. They squatted in the dirt. They fought through the biomechanical nightmare of a twisted pelvis and a giant brain. They bled. They gripped the hands of their sisters. They survived the fever. They made the brutal choices to protect the strong. They wept for the lost. And they carried the survivors across frozen continents and scorching deserts. And because they did all of that, you get to exist. The honest answer is, we don't know the names of the first midwives. We will never know the names of the grandmothers who carried the toddlers so the mothers could survive. History didn't record them. They didn't build pyramids. They didn't forge iron swords. They just did the hardest, most dangerous work on the planet, in the dark, with nothing but each other. And that feels both heavy and incredibly warm to me. It reframes everything. Birth isn't just a medical procedure, it is the original human crucible. It is the very reason we had to become social, the reason we had to develop empathy, the reason we learned to hold each other's hands in the dark. Our physical weakness forced us to invent human connection. We are the species that only survives because we do not let each other suffer alone. So let us go back to where we started, back to that sterile white hospital room. The beeping monitors, the bright lights, the doctor in scrubs. It is the same event. It is the same twisted pelvic bone. It is the same giant, beautiful brain entering the world. But now you know what is actually happening in that room. You know that the woman lying on that bed is the latest anchor in an unbroken chain of survivors stretching back 50,000 years into the dark. Every breath she takes is an echo of the women in the cave. Every hand she holds is the ghost of the first midwives. We built the hospitals, the monitors, and the medicine so that no mother ever has to walk away into the forest again. We built the modern world to finally tip the odds in our favor. Look around you today. If you have a mother you can text, or a grandmother who is still here, or if you look at yourself in the mirror and realize the sheer mathematical impossibility of your own existence, take a second to appreciate the fight it took to get you here. Tell me in the comments down below, who in your life makes you realize that the ancient chain didn't break? I read these, and I want to hear your stories. If this made you see the ordinary world a little differently today, hit subscribe. Join us. We love looking at the things you walk past every day and uncovering the absolute abyss of history hiding right behind them. Because life is fragile, but humanity is profoundly, stubbornly resilient.